Big win for the Addicts as they brush aside Blackburn Rovers in style. Hello, welcome into the From the Five Floyd episode 18, I think it is. My name is Callum. I'll be your host this afternoon. It's a Sunday afternoon. I know the NFL and the Premier League are on at the moment, so I'm not expecting a huge number of people to be in live. But if you're listening back on the podcast, I appreciate it. Hi Sam, how you doing? Couple coming in now. That was nice, wasn't it? That was a fun afternoon. Very little stress, very dominant performance. Just one of those really sort of nice Sunday mornings this morning. Where I woke up very tired, but that's my own fault. But very, very comfortable victory on Saturday, and really it could have been 5 or 6. 3 didn't actually tell the full story of the game. Toff made some fantastic saves, and Reece Burke missed from half a yard. So, yeah, just one of those sorts of games. I think the manager was spot on. The team selection was, as I sort of predicted when we did the preview with Emma on Wednesday. You couldn't drop Burke, you couldn't drop Bree, and it becomes really difficult now because both, again, I thought were excellent yesterday. Bree with another lovely assist, got a goal. Burke defensively as solid as anything. Looked completely comfortable. The only sort of negative I think to come out of the game was obviously Josh Edwards having to come off. Their play came off at half time as well, so I think it was just a particularly heavy tackle. I can't remember if he got booked, the player. I don't think he did, but I was pretty sure it was a booking. Actually, I don't think he even gave a foul, the referee. There was some weird officiating yesterday where fouls that were fouls weren't given, and fouls that weren't things that weren't fouls were given as fouls. It was just one of those sort of strange refereeing performances. But at the end of the day, I don't think it massively affected the game, minus maybe the penalty shout. I was chatting to Mark, who we had on obviously on Wednesday as well, and he was messaging me after the game saying we should have had a Stonewall penalty. Kane Ramsey, I think Lloyd Jones with I think his arm was up. I don't know if it hits him on the arm. I don't have a great view of the opposition box, if I'm honest with you. I sit in the front row at the covered end. So I didn't have a great view of it. So, it may have been Stonewall, but considering some of the decisions I go against us the last couple of weeks, I think it probably is one of those where it's evened out a bit. Sounds like make some changes on Tuesday. Yeah, it's difficult now because I would have gone, okay, you played the same lineup and then you bring Ramsey and probably Apter back in Tuesday night. I don't think you can drop Bree, goal and assist, right? That's 3 goal contributions in 2 games. You look at it and you go, well, I can't really drop him. And if you can't drop him, you're in a place where it's like, okay, so who do I? I'd rather not play Burke. I think 2 times in 4 days. I think that would be slightly crazy considering his injury history. So I think probably you drop him out. You bring Ramsey in and say match that. I thought Ramsey was good when he came on. Gillespie's obviously going to come in on Tuesday. That's pretty obvious from the start. I thought he was very good when he came on. As a player, looked like he wanted to play. That's 8 goals now in a year for a centre back, which is pretty silly. I thought we were decent. I think we were pretty dominant in the centre of midfield, and we'll get to Connor Coventry in a little bit because I want to give him his flowers. But I thought Doc was very good in there. The Championship seems to suit him. He has to be on the ball a lot less, which sounds sort of counterintuitive, but he just gets to sort of break passing lines. And he can sort of focus on doing that. There's a lot less ball in the air, so I think his lack of height is less problematic at this level, and sort of actually his lack of great first touch, but he's a really tenacious tackler, and a better passer of the ball than I remember from last season. Maybe that's just him growing more comfortable with the players around him. Sonny Kerry, I mean, that's a heck of a hit. The way it sort of bends outside of the post and then bends back in. That's a really, really beautiful finish. Excuse me, I'm going to cough 1 second. Sorry about that, everybody. But yeah, it's an excellent hit. I mean, the keeper's nowhere near it. There's nothing you can do about that. It sort of starts at a bit of a weird height and then sort of curves round. It's an absolute beauty of a hit. And a much more difficult to score, as Nathan said. He said, miss from 3 yards and then score from 30. But it's what we do as a football club sometimes. And then James Bree. I'm not massively sure from watching the replay the keeper should do better. Again, I think it's similar to when it was on QPR made it 3-1. When we played them, it doesn't matter. It's a nice finish. It's good for him to get a goal. 3-0 looks better than 2-0 on a score sheet, and really it should have been 4. So, a minimum. Tyrese Campbell had a couple of shots, whisker away. I thought he looked very, very good. I thought the energy from everyone that was playing was good. I've still got my Charlie Callum concerns. I think anybody who's a fan does. He just isn't getting into games enough. And there was a beautiful ball that Tyrese played across the box. It's literally just sitting there for a number 9 to walk right in and tap that in the corner. And he's just not there, right? I think he's top of the box. He's not gambled. He's not made that run, and that's that's a killer. In a game where it's 1-0, for example. There was a lovely ball from Coventry over the top. Stuart, welcome to the chat. The lovely ball from Coventry. It goes right over the top, and it's onto his foot if Coleman makes that run, and he just kind of stands still. And that's my concern with him is that I still think it's going to take time. I still think he's a good enough finisher, but I think he's on one of those weird things where he didn't score a championship goal for QPR. And I do think that, as Stuart's saying here, all the confidence gone. I think there is a confidence thing happening. And I think that he so badly needs that first goal. But he's not, he's not a net negative when he's on the pitch. Don't get me wrong. The point of this podcast in many ways is to take sort of some of the temperature maybe and turn it down a little bit from, after sort of games. I try to be a little bit sort of more calm and collected when I sort of sit at the mic. But my thing isn't, I think that it's a bad signing or it's this or it's that. I think anyone that knows me or has listened to this podcast knows that I would have bought Kone instead at that price. Whether Wickham would have sold him to us, I think is complicated, and as a whole sort of there's a number of different things. But when I sort of watch how Callum's not kind of getting involved in those sorts of runs, and it's not like he's not doing the pressing bit, right? And that's the bit that when strikers don't have confidence, they really stop doing, is the running. He's still doing the running. He's working hard. It's just in the moments where you need him to make that split-second decision, it's not happening. And the question, I guess, is it that he can't do that split-second decision, which would be very problematic? Or is it that it's just going to take him time to adjust to knowing that he has to make that split-second decision, if that makes sense to everybody? So, I think there are some concerns. I think, especially when Tanto came on, I thought he was absolutely brilliant. Actually, I thought Miles was brilliant too. I thought both of them wreaked absolute mayhem when they came on. And you saw Blackburn sort of take their big, sort of strong centre-back and stick him on Miles because you've got a lad who's 6'5" coming on to sort of stand over people, and so they moved him on. But that just left Tanto with these sort of two smaller, sort of wide centre backs, and he just sort of a right back and a centre back, I guess, and he just absolutely dominated them. It was physically, he was there, and it's the first time I've sort of kind of listened. When Sam, who's in the comments, was talking about Chucks, and he looked a little bit like that actually. I think for the first time for me yesterday he was just bullying people. And I think that was, it was so good to see that goal was giving him all the confidence in the world. And I think Kelman needs that. He just needs that moment, that finish to go in. Agree with Kone, we should have pushed the boat out a bit more. I think the issue is I think actually Kone was cheaper. My issue with it is I think we've actually funded QPR making the signing. I don't think it was lack of money. I think we wanted Kelman. I think we wanted Kelman since April time or something. I think even if we'd been in League One, they would have tried to buy Callum, whether it would have come is another question. But I think there's been, way Callum and way Charlie and Nathan have talked about it. It sounds like the agents have been in contact for a little while. So I think that was the player he wanted. And I'm not saying it's necessarily the wrong decision. You don't know about Kone's personality. Kone started this last season. I've said this on the pod before. Kone started really, really strong and then went really, really cold, whereas Callum started cold and then became really strong. So I think that you can't judge him almost until he gets that first goal. The worry here is how many games it's going to take him to get that first goal. And I think that's a reasonable sort of concern. I think the positive with it, and I think this is the bit that I think that fans should focus on with Charlie, is I think that he's doing the work, right? He's not down in tools. He's not throwing his hands up in frustration. He keeps his head down. He's going. It's just, can he make that split? It's a skill, right? Can he make that split second decision? I run outside or I run inside. And that's sort of the concern for me, is whether he can take that step. I think Tanto's shown that he can do that. There was a couple of runs. There's a lovely, I think it was Doc, the great interception, I think, from the centre back, or Tanto's in 1-on-1 because he takes him and he comes inside and then goes out. And that's the sort of run that Kelman's not making. Actually, it probably should be a better ball. And so that's where I kind of am with it. We've got a thing from Sam. It just shows link up play doesn't work with TC. I don't know if it doesn't with TC. Sam. I think TC was good yesterday. I think that the thing about Godden is true. Stuart saying I made doubts about Godden this level as well. I mean, the thing about Godden is Godden scores at every level he plays at, right? Whether he sort of fits into the team or needs to start every week the way he was last season, I think is probably more questionable. But if you give Matty Godden 10 games, he'll get you 4 or 5 goals. That's just kind of what he's done. I think even last time at Coventry, he had 4 or 5 that season. He was playing really bit part. So he'll score goals. I'm less worried about Godden coming back. But just to go back to kind of Sam's point here, I think TC is actually playing better now. I think he's actually adjusting, and I'm not sure that Kelman is adjusting to playing with him, if that makes sense. I think TC now starting to say, oh, it is quicker, but it's not that much faster than League One. I'm still dealing with very big, very strong centre-backs who aren't the most fleet of foot. If I take him outside, I can cut back across. And I think you saw both him and Tanto doing that. Now, that might be a tactical thing, that maybe Nathan Jones going, look, they don't have particularly fleet of foot centre backs, take them outside and take them back in. You'll both get shots off. But you start to see Leeburn doing it as well, where you sort of take him and then take him around and sort of create space. I think we're right. I think we need to see a Leeburn Kelman front too at some point, because I think that Leeburn kind of creates that space because he's just such a big bloke, right? It's a bit like is one of the few comparisons that there is between him and his dad, is that his dad would create space just by being there, and I think Curbs has talked about it quite a lot. Yeah, Stuart. So teams seem to be double marking TC, and that's true. And the reason why is because he's the only pace that we have, right? We don't have any pace anywhere else. So if you can get him out of the game, you can kind of get the pace up. But I don't think Blackburn did a particularly good job of doing that. I think he had two or three shots in the second half, especially where he got that space, he got into those gaps, he got into sort of that second level of the defense. I think that's actually an American football phrase, but you know what I mean? Like, he got into that second bit and was able to sort of really exploit that space. And he's unlucky actually not to score the second shot. I think he takes as a whisker away. That I can see really well from where I sit. Yeah, Samsung TC had another decent one yesterday. He feels just back into an attacking winger rather than the partnership with Kelman. He's told to, right? I think that's why, is that he is sort of playing one up front. That's why I think it worked better with Lieber in terms of the one up front, because he's a big lad. What you're trying to do is and it worked, right? He did have that cross across the box where Kelman should be crashing the box. But I think Kelman almost has to learn that in a Nathan Jones system, you're not going to have 7 or 8 opportunities or 5 or 6 shots. You're going to have to, if you see the ball coming across the box, you have to be there, because it's going to be one of the very few times you're going to get it. And I think actually one thing Godden did do last season is that if the ball was in the box, he was there. He was always there. And I think that's probably, Stuart, where I disagree with you on the Godden at this level point. I think his size probably works against him, and the fact that he's older and he's probably lost a step. But he knows where to be when the ball drops. And I think at the moment, my concern comes on 2 levels. If he's not there when the ball's dropping and he's not making necessarily the right run at the right time. But I think again, it's just going to take some time. I think Nathan said it right. We've got to learn how he plays, and he's got to learn how we play. And I think that there's almost a conversation between how we play and how he plays. And I think we just haven't quite reached the right balance yet. But we're picking up points, right? If somebody had offered me 11 points from the first 8 games with 4 clean sheets of 7 games, right, I'd have been absolutely all over it. So, we can get to that. I think one of the things I was reading yesterday before I go into my I'm going to give Connor Coventry every flower on planet Earth thing, which will be the next 10 minutes of this podcast. I warn everybody in advance. Before we do that, I think that was a really interesting tweet that I saw. I can't remember who it was now. Was it Reese who's on there all the time? I think it may have been Reese M. He was, or maybe it was, but they were saying that oh, that's great. That's great to hear, Sam. I think the women really could go up. They had a bit of a horror show last week and a really drab 0-0 at home, but the women winning away at Newcastle, that's fantastic to hear. It'd be great to have the WSL at the Valley, I think. But yeah, I mean, if we can get the attack working, then we're going to be a very, very good side as defensive midfield coach. Yeah, they are. I mean, that, and we'll come to the midfield in a minute. But so he was making the point. I think it was now that I think about it, was saying I actually don't know if Kaminski's a good goalkeeper or not because he's not been tested. Leicester, Kaminski could have got on a sun lounger and lay in the middle of his goal, and he would have been absolutely fine. Like, we're just not giving up opportunities. I think if you're Kaminski looking, I think maybe before the season would have looked at this sort of derby game and gone, maybe he'll be busier. But really, he's here for games like when we come back from the break and we go to Portman Road, right? That's what he's here for, is in those sorts of games that pardon me again. The sort of games where, previously we've gone and been, absolutely shellacked, right? Whether it was Elland Road under Bowyer or Portman Road over the years or St. Mary's or whatever it is historically, where over the last sort of 10 years or so we've gone absolutely battered. You need, I think, a keeper at that point who can make those sorts of world-class stops in a moment. Whether he can do it or not, honestly, I don't know. I mean, historically, he has done. I don't think you'll find a Luton fan or a Blackburn fan that'll tell you he's anything other than an excellent shot stopper. But that's kind of why he's here. But it makes the point that defense in front is so good, right? We just don't give shots up. And when we do, it's a 20-yard, shot that's going to go into Rosette. We're so organised. We're just such a massive pain in the backside to play against. And I mean that entirely as a compliment, right? We man-mark players like Cantwell out of the game. We'll come to Coventry in a second. You've got Doc running around in front, just kind of breaking up supply lines. And then you've got Kerry, who's constantly running. But behind that, you've got 3 centre-backs who are big, strong and tall. And we play deep enough that you can't put the ball in behind. And I think this is where this Gillespie change, and Stuart's right. I've got it earlier in the chat where he said Maka was superb, and Maka was superb. Fair play to him for there's a ball that came over on the left side, and I feel it was their I've forgotten their winger's name now. It was the Japanese winger. You can just see Maka give him a look over, and he's going to him with his eyes. He's like, "You're not going to win this." And the lad sort of goes to go get the ball, and he just absolutely shoulder barges him almost into the the advertising boards. And I thought that's such a good bit of defending, right? You don't have to worry about him being quicker than you because you just physically get there and just knock him off, and then he can't run past you, right? So a perfectly legal tackle as well, perfectly shoulder to shoulder. But my thing about Maka is Maka does not have the turn of pace. He turns a bit like a lorry. And so as a result, we've got to really make sure we're playing. And Bell's not the quickest at left back either. So the lack of pace on that left side, I think, is going to be challenged with Edwards out. And that's something that I think we should pay attention to. I don't think he's going to move and play inverted fullbacks. I think he's just going to play Bell out there. This was my worry a couple of pods ago. I think I mentioned it. I said my real concern is I really would have liked a left wing back in. I think that's the one position we haven't. I think in January it's pretty obvious. There's Fukuada will come in. So we'll see what we're going to do with Bree. At the moment, I think it'd be hard to let him go, especially with his contract running out. I think he's already basically said, I want to stay. He said, I'd rather move permanently. So I think that there will be some scope to do that. Fukuada's free, so it's not going to be a huge cost, maybe you can bring him in. He doesn't speak a word of English. Maybe you can bring him in and give him, just a time to settle without having to be in the squad. But we'll kind of have to see how that happens. But the one position I would like is if they can find, just someone to kind of play that left wing back spot. I know Fuller at the moment's covering, but I really wouldn't want to see Fuller, for example, if we go to Portman, Ryder Bell's injured as well. You got to play Fuller out there. I think that could be really problematic defensively. So I think we've got to be a little bit careful in terms. The fact that Edwards walked off, I know he was on crutches at the end, but Nathan was very clear it's just precautionary. I hope it's not a serious injury. I don't think it was a catastrophic one because he kept trying to run on it. So we'll hope it's just a short-term injury for Josh. All right, let's move on to who I thought was the best player on the pitch, and actually I think probably has been for me the most consistent player at Charlton this season. We'll just do another 10 minutes or so of review, and then we'll call it a day. I'll be on the Chronicles later if anyone wants to come and say hello and listen to some other perspectives, many of them better than mine. But Connor Coventry was absolutely sensational yesterday, and I've been trying to think of a different word. I can't. He was just absolutely brilliant. If you want to know how to play number 6 central defensive midfield in a championship game, study that tape. Controlled the tempo of the game, yes, but he's a West Ham Academy graduate playing defensive midfielder. That's what they do, right? But it was more than that. It was any loose ball he was mopping up. He had Cantwell, basically in his back pocket for most of the game. Cantwell couldn't get out. He was breaking up supply lines. He was playing these gorgeous sort of 20-yard balls. If he's added that to his game, he is a player worth an absolute seismic ton in the market. What makes it really interesting, and again, I don't know, and I didn't know at the time how he dropped down to League One level. I know Sheffield Wednesday were interested, but were willing him to pay him a packet of quavers a week or something. But the fact West Ham, who are my local club, by the way, and I thank them and their academy for both Burke and Coventry, is the fact that they were willing to let him go for a sell-on fee. They didn't ask for any money. There's no cash involved. It was just a sell-on fee. I think it's a pretty sizable one. I think it might be as high as 20%. It may even be slightly higher than that. I think Corley reported on it at some point. But you look at him and you're like, you easily, if he's playing 25-yard balls over the top in the championship, you easily get 10 million for a 25-year-old player doing that. Right? It controls tempo. He's strong enough. Right, I don't think he's the strongest defensive midfielder. I think the game against Birmingham, where he kind of fell over when he was sort of slightly pushed by Stansfield, tells you that there's probably a ceiling to him. Rodri, he's not. But I think that in terms of a player who was going to make that step up, that was the one player that I thought, in terms of moving up to a different division, wasn't going to have any problems whatsoever. And he's just taken to it like a duck to water. It's just a step up. I thought it was good in the opening game against Watford. I thought he was the only player that came out with much credit from the game at QPR. He was very, very good against Leicester, against Samare, who's a very, very good, sort of, maybe not Premier League proven, but, a bottom half Premier League player in some ways. He's really dominated midfield. I know it was Millwall's kind of backup, but you look at one of those players, Luongo, right? He was playing for Ipswich in the Premier League last year. He was absolutely dominated by Coventry a few weeks ago. Last week, he was excellent up at Sheffield United in really challenging conditions. Playing those sorts of outballs is really difficult when it's all slippery and slick. Right? He should have had an assist because Callum should have made the right run and it's right on his foot yesterday. He was just everywhere and anywhere. And by the end of it, he was still sprinting up and down at 93 minutes played to go and celebrate the goal. And I just thought, this is really difficult for Joe Rankin Costelli because you just can't drop him. Right, but you can't drop Doc at the moment either. So you're going, like, how's he going to get in? If you're Nibs, you're going, I've moved for, I know it's relatively small money in footballing terms, but relatively large money for a newly promoted side at basically £2 million up to £2.5 million, isn't it, with add-ons or something like that? Right, I can't get in the team. Rankin Costello can't get in the team, and this is a championship proven player. When we turn to Blackburn fans, they're going, oh, how's Joe playing? And you're going, he's played about 10 minutes. Right, because he just can't get in ahead of them. And Gab Sutton, I think, tweeted out this morning. He was saying sort of, how have Charlton ended up here? A number of these players you think are good League One players. And it's like, well, because if you go back to that recruitment that we did in the summer, we picked players, many of whom were just about to enter the prime of their careers. Right? Apt is 22, 23. even the recruitment we've done before, Gillespie's 28. Coventry was 23, I think, when we signed him. Like, these are players that are just about to hit that sort of prime peak. And I think we went, once they're in their primes, they will adjust, right? You have players like Lloyd Jones who haven't struggled to adjust at all. I know he actually played a few games in this level, as did Kerry when he was at Blackpool, right? So I think the thing is that we've recruited really well. We look really together, and I absolutely loved the double Nathan Jones blow kiss at the end of the game to the covered end. I think I tweeted a little bit excitedly, but he was saying, to me, it just looked like a man that had found home, right? I think a number of these players look as if they found, either their way back to a manager that changed their careers, your Breeze, your Burks of the world, or they look, your Bells, right? Or they've met, but the manager himself has come to a club which is, we've had our our tough moments. Crawley at home, I think, for anyone, is a really, really sore spot. But it's a club that's embraced him. It's an ownership group that's believed in him. And he's been allowed to make those really tough decisions, right? And God, I sound like Keir Starmer though. Lord forgive me, but he's been able to, sell Alfie May, right? He's been able to, and I know he actually wanted to, by the sound of things, to keep Dobson around. That's a bit tricky, but Dobson went, right? Like, he's been allowed to completely reshape this team in his image, but I think in doing so, they've actually kind of reshaped the club into this us versus them, mentality. And that's how it was at Luton, by all accounts. It always felt as if it's us against them, but we're one big family, right? And I think that's something, if you take anything from this podcast as we head into the game against Derby on Tuesday, right? For those of you that will be watching on Sky, or other means, and then I'll say hello. Come say hello to anyone that'll be at Pride Park. But we are really one sort of Stuart's right. Dobby wouldn't get into this team. Now, I actually don't know if he starts for Wrexham. I don't think he does at the moment. And then he would have thought Ramsey wouldn't get in this side, can't get into the side. I know that is something. To be fair, Luton fans did say Reece Burke was a Premier League centre back when fit, and that I think is objectively true. So there's not much else you can say. If the guy was fit, he wouldn't be in the Championship. I say that actually. I think he reminds me quite a lot of Jacob Greaves, who's at Ipswich now, who they bought from Hull. I think they're actually quite similar defenders, and he's top end of the Championship. So maybe that's where Burke would end up. But he's right on the cusp. I think that in terms of natural ability and especially the ability to read games and the leadership. You'll see Burke constantly pointing. You'll see him constantly sort of saying, you go there, you come here, you pull here, you go out there, right? And I think that that it was just, that he was, that there's a really sort of special talent to him, which you don't often find, for a team that's trying that's where we were, and kind of where we are. I think but I mean, the main thing I would take is let's stick together. Really have to support. Really say, look, this is going to be, there could be ups and downs. This is a big high. The question is when we hit the downs. To make it not toxic, to make it not difficult, to really sort of, I think, maybe keep the temperature turned down a little bit. This is from Sam. Have to agree with you. I thought Coventry does a strong job, but yesterday he was outstanding and dominated alongside Doc in the middle. But I mean, we absolutely dominated that midfield, and that's why the midfield matters, right? Arthur Ruben Amorim at the moment. What happens when you lose the midfield battle, right? That's why Nathan Jones plays a 5 at the back, but still keeps 3 midfielders. But just before I go, just in terms of a little bit of housekeeping, for those of you watching who can't really see it, you can't see it, unfortunately. I'll post a picture later. But I'm working on a few pieces of merch for anyone that wants to support. They're quite nice. They're quite minimalist. Very, very nice. Sort of. I've got a nice hoodie, and there'll be a t-shirt and a couple of different things. So if anyone's interested, feel free. Feel free to message me, and I'll see what I can do. But beyond that, it's obviously it's a Tuesday night game. which means there won't be a preview for Derby, and it was almost impossible to find anyone just because everyone's doing their post-match reviews. He was able to do today, so we won't have a preview. And what I'll do is I'll do a review/preview. So I'll do the review of the Derby game on Wednesday, 6:30 as normal, and then I'll do the preview of the Preston game. But for those of you that are like me, are going to be on the road a lot this week. Safe travels. Really enjoyable afternoon yesterday. Won't be home until almost this time next month, right? 3.5 weeks, I think, until we're back home. So a little while to go. Oh, there we go. Totally confident we'll beat Derby on Tuesday. I think CBT is injured. Oh, I'm shocked. He's injured again. What a surprise. I mean, Nathan Jones has a really good record at Pride Park as well. It's one of those grounds he does really well at. I secretly feel we're going to be okay at Derby as well. I mean, again, winning these 2 games means the pressure's kind of off. If you can get 2 points, maybe win one, if you can, or 2 draws, and you're in a good place, right? And I know that sounds like Nathan, but you are. Somehow we're 2 points off the playoffs. Let's not go over the top. I sort of posted, I was like, a man can dream, right? But let's not go over the top here. I would still snap your hand off for 21st. But I think we look much better, much better than I thought we would at this point in the season. And Croy last year was magic. It was Aniko changed that game. And when Aniko came on, that game completely flipped. But I think we scored a goal first half, didn't we? I think it was Alfie May. I think we hit them on the break twice. It'll be really interesting to see playing against. There's Paul Neil jumping on before going to talk to Oasis, talk about Champagne Supernova football. I was at the first night at Wembley, Paul. It was absolutely amazing. Enjoyed the night. It was like being 14 for a night. I don't want to think about how much the ticket cost, but enjoy the gig, mate. It's absolutely amazing, amazing show. So have a good time, and then I'll join you for the NFL next week. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for hopping on. I'll be replacing Paul for the evening on the Chronicles, whilst he's drinking pints and singing along to Champagne Supernova. I will be I'll be chatting about Gordon Coventry and Tyrese Campbell, I'm sure. But have a good rest of your afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining me as always. And I'll see you all on Wednesday evening. Bye for now.